In this presentation, I'm going to talk about how to do a basic project plan. So to do a basic project plan, so I talked in one of my other slide decks about some of these different decks rather, about some of the diagramming tools that we can use and techniques that we use in project management. And what I talked about was we start with a work breakdown structure where we brainstorm the list of tasks it's going to take as discreetly as possible, depending on the project, of course. We're going to try to brainstorm the length of time using something like the PERT technique, which is just a weighted average. We're also going to think about the relationship of those tasks, how one relates to another, which is going to help us identify the critical path, which is important for determining the shortest possible time to complete that project, or with the longest amount of time that tasks string together is usually our critical path that defines the shortest amount of time the project can be completed. And then I also talk about a Gantt chart, which is a great way to visualize the entire project in one big horizontal bar graph, which I'll also show you. So our first step is to think of our tasks. So we need to do our work breakdown structure first before we can move on to any of the other tasks. The other techniques that I talk about. So let's do a simple example here. Let's pretend that you're sitting in a classroom right now, and I'm sure all of you have been in a classroom before, a typical college classroom that has computers. And imagine, typical college classroom maybe has 25 computers in it. So let's imagine that we have been tasked with managing a project of replacing all of the computers in a computer classroom. Maybe they have the good old-fashioned desktop computers, and we're switching to all-in-ones, which are basically a monitor with a keyboard and a mouse, and the computer is contained within the monitor, so it's going to be a little bit more streamlined. Maybe we're going to switch to Wi-Fi instead of having wires all over the classroom to keep things simple. So we're just modernizing a classroom, for example. So we're going to switch to Wi-Fi. We're going to, so that it's, we don't have to have wires running all over the room. We're going to put in these all-in-one workstations that don't need a PC tower anymore. And we're going to take all these old systems out and decommission them and so forth. Sounds like a pretty simple project. But what I'd like you to do is pause the video for a few minutes, and on your own, I want you to write down the tasks that you think it would take to complete a project like that. And in the meantime, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm also going to create a list of tasks, and we'll talk about them together here in just a minute. So I've come up with some tasks that I might use to complete this project. Your tasks might be a little bit different, but I'm sure they're probably similar. I'm going to start with researching some of the options for Wi-Fi and the all-in-one PCs. I'm going to get some funding approval. Like anything else in higher education, we have to get approvals. We probably have to go to some committee somewhere to get it approved. We're going to place our orders. Once we get this funding, then we can place the orders for what we decided. We're going to remove the old PCs and wiring from the classroom. We're going to install the new stuff. We're going to unpackage and image the new PCs. We're going to test the new PCs to make sure they work. We're going to install the Wi-Fi, and we're going to install the new PCs. Actually, I have installed the new PCs in there twice for some reason, so let me get rid of number 10. I only need these 9 tasks. So I have 9 tasks, not 10. But that's our first step, is come up with this basic list of tasks. Now, in a real project, you would also briefly describe each one of these tasks as well. They may not be obvious, right? I think this is a pretty obvious example. Notice I also gave myself a brief overview of what exactly this project is, just so everybody knows what we're trying to do here. So if you forget what we're doing, you can look at that brief description there. Now, I just did this in Notepad, by the way. No special software here. I'm just doing this right in Notepad, and any operating system, it doesn't matter. So there's no specialized project management tools or anything being used here. So my next step is I want to estimate the amount of time each one of these tasks is probably going to take to complete. And if you recall, our estimation of our time estimation using the PERT technique, we're going to take our optimistic plus our realistic times 4 plus our pessimistic time. I'll put spaces in here to make it a little bit clear. And we're going to divide that by 6, which is really just a fancy way of saying a weighted average. So for example, my estimated time for the Wi-Fi, for researching Wi-Fi, I figure this would probably take me about, maybe no more than a day, right? We'll do everything in increments of days here. So maybe that's going to take me about a day to complete. So we'll say, optimistically, I can complete this in about 0.5 days. Realistically, it's probably going to take me a day. And pessimistically, maybe I'm just not sure. Oh, by that's 1 times 4. And maybe pessimistically, this is going to take me, I don't know, maybe it's going to take me 2 days, pessimistically. And then I'm going to divide that by 6. So according to the PERT analysis technique, that's going to give me an estimated time of about 1.0833 days, right? We can round it to 1. So I'll just round that off to 1 day. So there we go. So for the Wi-Fi options, that's how long I think it's going to take me. So what I'd like you to do is pause the video, go through each one of these tasks, and try to estimate how long you think each one of these is going to take using that PERT analysis, just like I did here. So go ahead and pause and brainstorm that for a few minutes. All right, you'll see that I've completed my PERT analysis. And again, yours might look a little bit different. So, and you'll see I did some different things down here towards the bottom. I'm going to talk about those things. So first, I researched the. I figured that the research would take about 1 day each, according to my PERT analysis. Now, placing the order, I encompassed all the time it takes from placing the order until I finally get the boxes, right? Which I said is going to be. Let's see here. I think actually my estimated time is wrong. Let me update my estimate times on these. All right, sorry about that. So I updated those. So for getting funding approval, I figured optimistically it should take 5 days to go through the process to get money. Realistically, in higher ed, everything takes more than 5 days. So we'll say realistically probably 10 days, to get that approval. And pessimistically, maybe it'll take 30 days. And again, as a project manager, that would be my experience telling me, roughly how long I think that's going to take. So I come up with 12.5 days to get that funding approval. And then to place the order, again, I'm encompassing the entire process. So, maybe 5-day shipping is what I'm going to pay for. But realistically, if I pay for 5 days, realistically, it's going to take 10 days because, it might take a couple days before they actually, put it on the truck. And then it's going to take, a couple more days of slack time. Maybe there's a weekend in there somewhere. And then, pessimistically, if things don't go the way that they're supposed to go, maybe it'll take 30 days. Maybe it'll get stuck somewhere or, get lost in shipping or something. Or maybe 1 or 2 of them won't show up and I'll have to wait another week for those to show up. So we'll say 12.5, just to kind of round it out a little bit, just like the previous task. So removing the old PCs, I said about an hour, or 1 day rather, to do that. Now moving down to installing the PCs. So I broke this down. I made another line item called 1 PC, where I figured out just to do 1 PC, instead of thinking about all 25 together, I broke it down more granular so that it would be a more accurate estimate. So I figured about 2.5 hours and by the way, this is hours, not days. I figured about 2.5 hours for me to, for somebody, for, a single person to install 1 PC. So then I took the 2.5 hours per computer times 25 computers. So I figure 16.5 aggregate hours, which is 8 days. But then I probably have 2 people working on that, so I could probably get it done in 4 days. Same thing with installing and imaging the new PCs. I used pretty much the same estimate, so I came up with another 4 days to do that as well for unpackaging and imaging. So, just to install them at the desks in the classroom is going to take 4 days, and then another 4 days for 2 people to image the new PCs with some, standard image that we use that has all of our software installed or something like that. And of course, after that's all done, we're going to need to test it. So I figured about 1.5 hours to test each one. So again, 25 of them, 2 people working on it, probably about 2.5 days that I have to tack onto my schedule for that. And of course, we have to do our Wi-Fi. So installing the Wi-Fi is probably going to take, another day. So here we have 1 day. And by the way, testing the new PCs, we have to make sure that the Wi-Fi is working, right? And we'll talk about that here in just a second. So about a day to do that last task. So that's all my tasks to complete this. So my next step, in the next slide, I'm going to, or not the slide, sorry, this is a demonstration here. So I'm going to move this off to the side. So try to remember what I put here. You might want to write it down, or you're probably doing this on your own as well. So move this to the side because we're going to need this for the next section where we're going to try to diagram this. And the first type of diagram that we're going to do, so I'm going to move this out of my way. So it's off to the side now. You can't see it now. So I have those 9 tasks on mine. I'm now going to diagram those. And to do that, I'm going to use this website called draw.io. It's a free tool, doesn't cost anything, and you can do your Gantt charts on here too if you wanted to, although it's, it wouldn't be dynamic, but at least you can, create them if you wanted to. I'm going to show you another example as well. So I'm going to use Google Drive, but you could also do, if you select device, so when you first go to this website, there's no login for this. It's a free tool. You don't have to create an account. It just connects with another account. So again, I'm going to use my device as or you could use device, which will allow you to save to the device, but you could use Google Drive as well if you have a Google account. OneDrive is Microsoft, so that if you want to connect this to your Microsoft account, for example. So I'm going to use OneDrive because most of the colleges that I work with have OneDrive accounts for us. So for example, with Temple, we have a OneDrive account. With Atlantic Community College, I do. With Rowan, I have one. Maybe not Camden County, but you get the idea. All right, so we have to authorize this. So I'm going to uncheck Remind Me because that way I can do this again if I need to. But I'm going to click on Authorize and just and log into my Google account. All right, so it's logged into my Google account. You can see here, it recognizes me. Yours obviously will have your name. Oops, I hit the wrong button there. There we go. All right, so I am going to create a new diagram. So right here, create new diagram. And I'm just going to do a blank diagram. It doesn't really matter what you select here because you'll see all these tools anyway. All right, I have to tell it where to create this diagram in my Google Drive. So I'm going to click here under Google Drive. And if I wanted to put this in a folder, you might have to go to your Google Drive and create a folder to do this, but either way, you can always save it later. So I'm just going to say use root folder, which is fine. So I'll just use the root folder in my Google Drive. And I've got my basic drawing tools here. So here's what I'm going to do. To do my network diagram, I'm going to put some circles on here. So we'll make this look just like the textbook. So I'll have task number 1. I'm going to make my circle a little smaller. All right, so there's task number 1. And now I'm just going to go ahead and copy this. So I just did Control C and Control V, and I'm going to rename this to task number 2. And since I have 9 tasks, I'm going to make 9 circles for myself. Okay, so here are my 9 tasks. Each one is just a little bubble that I'm going to put on my graph, or on my chart here, on my network diagram. So the first task is researching Wi-Fi and researching all-in-one PCs. Those are my first 2 tasks. Now, from what I can tell, if I'm thinking about dependencies, I don't have to do one before the other. I could research those concurrently, right? So I could research both of these options at the same time. So I can kick off this project with both of these running at the same time. Now let me just move these a little further apart so we have some, oops, I didn't mean to draw an arrow there. Let me delete that. So I'm just going to select my object and move this down. They got this nice grid on here so I can try to keep it even. All right, so the next task on my list is getting funding approval. So in order to get funding approval, do I have to decide on what I'm getting? And I would say the answer is yes, because I can't get funding approval if I don't know how much I need, right? So I need to know how much funding, how much money I'm going to need to get approval for. I can't just give them an estimate, right? But once I get my funding approved, then chances are I can start ordering this stuff. So that leads me to task 4, which is placing my order. So I've got a couple other tasks here. I've got removing the old PCs, which is task 5. I've got 6, which is installing the new PCs. Task number 7, which is unpacking. Number 8, testing the new PCs. And then number 9, installing Wi-Fi. So here's the thing. For removing the old PCs, could I do this before I receive the packages? And I would say yes. So I'm going to do number 5 before I get the packages. So I can do after I get my funding. Obviously, I wouldn't want to do this before I get my funding, but I'm going to go ahead and start this after I get my funding. So I'm going to put it right here. Oops, right here to say that I could do this about the same time. I'm going to move this guy over a little bit. There we go. All right, so here I've got my funding. Here I place my orders. This one I'm going to go ahead and remove the old PCs, which again I can do at the same time. And this is my placing my order. So I place my order, and when I place my order, I can start removing those old PCs. Okay, so this is replacing the old PCs down here. I'm removing the old ones here. I placed my order. After I remove them and after I place the order, that's going to lead me to step number 6, I think, which is installing the new PCs. Of course, I think I probably can't install the new ones until I unpackage them. So I'm going to go to number 7, which is unpack an image. So here we're going to unpack an image. Now I can't unpack an image. Well, theoretically, I could unpack and image the PCs before I'm done on removing the old ones, because I can do this somewhere else, right? So I could do it all at the same time. In fact, if I think about this, maybe because I've got some slack time on number 5, I'm going to go ahead and say that that I can place. Oops, I didn't mean to blow that up. I'm going to go ahead and place my order first. Then this guy can start happening after I receive them, and this guy can also start happening after. That way I'm not removing these PCs before I actually have the other ones in hand, right? What if I have to start classes before they actually get here? Next, I have task number, let's see, so task number 6 is to install them in the classroom. So I can go ahead and start installing over here. Oops, I didn't mean to make that smaller. Sometimes Draw.io is a little finicky. So I'm going to drag this over here. This is going to be my installation. So I can't start installing the PCs in the classroom until I've imaged them and I've installed them. And the other thing I have to do, I'm just going to move this over here. I also have to install the Wi-Fi. So the Wi-Fi also has to start happening at some point. So I'm going to put that right in the middle here, because I can start installing that Wi-Fi probably right after I do everything else. Then we have number 6, which is test the new PCs to make sure everything works. I can't do that until everything else is done. All right, and what is 8? Oh wait, I'm sorry. Number 6 is installing the PCs. So let me figure this out here. So 7 is unpacking and imaging the PCs. Number 9 is installing Wi-Fi. And number 5 is removing the old PC and wiring. Then I can install the PCs. And then finally, number 8, I can test everything. After it's all installed, we can do our testing. And I'm going to move this right up here. So number 6 is installing the PCs. I just have to have these 3 done to do this. Well, these 2 done to do this. And number 5 can go right to number 8. So let's draw our arrows now. So this is where it gets a little fun. So now, oops, I didn't mean to do that. So now I'm going to draw an arrow from here to here. And I'm going to draw an arrow from here to here. Then number 3, so 1 and 2, once they're complete, then I can do number 3, which is getting my funding approval. Then I'm going to draw an arrow to number 4, because once I get that done, I can place my order. Then after I place my order, I can do a couple things. So after the order's placed, I'll be able to unpackage and image the new systems once they arrive. And also once they arrive, I'll be able to install the Wi-Fi. And also, once I have everything, I'll be able to remove the old PCs and the wiring. So then, once I have the old PCs and wiring removed, I will be able to install the PCs, the new ones. I'll also be able to, after unpacking unpacking and imaging the new PCs, I'll be able to install them in the classroom. And when number 9 is complete, which is installing Wi-Fi, so this one will have to be complete. And I might want to rearrange these a little bit to make it more clear, but this will allow me to test, and this one allows me to test. All right, so just to make this a little bit clearer, I think what I should do is take task number 9. I'm going to move that down here. I'm going to move task number 6 up here. And I'm going to move this guy down here. And then I'm going to move this guy over here just so it's a little bit clearer. There we go. And I think that'll work. All right, so now that I've got this all plotted on here, and I'm just going to clean this up a little bit more. All right, that looks a little better. So to review, and I'm just going to move this last one right here just because I think it'll look a little nicer up there. So to review, so task 1 and 2 is doing my research. Once I research Wi-Fi and PCs, decide what I'm going to buy, I'm going to go ahead and try to get approval. After I get my approval, I place my order. And then after I place my order, I'm going to, let's see, number 7, I can, so after I place the order and I receive, so this is after I receive my new PCs, which might take up to 12.5 days. That's when I'll be able to unpack the new PCs. I'll also be able to remove the old PCs and wiring, and I'll be able to install the Wi-Fi. When these two are done, I can, number 6, which is install the PCs in the classroom, and then once everything's all set up, I can test to make sure everything works, which is step number 8. And that's it. So that's my project. All right, so if you'd like, you can pause the video, and using what I just did as a guide, go ahead and make your own network diagram. Now, one thing that would make the network diagram a little bit more clear is to put labels in here so that you know which one of these, what each one of these bubbles does. The other thing you could do is add the amount of time that each one of these takes. You'll notice in your textbook they actually show the times on each one of these bubbles, so you can kind of trace what that critical path is, because you can sort of figure out what that critical path is here when you add those times. So I went ahead and added my my times on here, and again, this is from the PERT analysis that I did in my work breakdown structure. So I took that task, my list of tasks. First, I put all these bubbles on here, showed the dependencies of all my tasks. Now I have the amount of time it's going to take to complete each one of these tasks. Now I can try to identify what the shortest time to complete the project is. How long is this overall project going to take? And I do that by finding a critical path. So what I do, so for starting out here, I know that these two items here can happen concurrently, and either way, if they're both happening at the same time, it should take me about a day. So let me go ahead and highlight those as red. All right, so that's the first part. We know that this has to happen. There's no other path here, so that's the only possible path, so I know that's going to be red. Now I ask myself, when I get to this point right here, this is going to take 12.5 days. But which one of these tasks, in other words, which one of these arrows is going to take the longest? So obviously it's going to be this one up here. So the path through this task is going to be the longest. The path from task 4 to task 6, the longest pathway is going to be through path 7. Going through path 5 adds a day. Going through path 9 is only going to add a day. So I know since this is the longest one here, this is my next critical path. So I'm going to highlight these two, and I'm going to make those red. Now that I've arrived here, I know that this is my next most critical right here, and that gets me to the end of my project. So now all I have to do is, since I've identified the critical path, I just have to figure out the aggregate amount of time to complete the project. So it's going to be 1 day plus 12.5 days plus another 12.5 days plus another 4 days plus another 4 days, and then finally 2.5 days. So that gives me the total time to complete this project. So when I add it all up, that's 37 days, 36.5 to be exact, but that means it's going to take me about 37 days to complete this project, according to my analysis. So that's the network diagramming technique. So this is one way that you can try to identify how long it's going to take to complete the project, what the critical path is, and also the dependencies on these tasks. Once you have this done, creating the Gantt chart becomes pretty straightforward. So once again, I'm going to take this diagram and I'm going to move it to the side. And you can do the same thing if you've been following along Go ahead and move that to the side. So I'm going to move that to my other monitor. And now I'm going to show you a tool called Team Gantt. So Team Gantt is just a sort of a Gantt. It's a Gantt chart tool that you can use online for free. Now you could make a Gantt chart in Microsoft Excel. Some students, if you go online and do some Google searches for how to do a Gantt chart, you'll find all kinds of examples on how to use Microsoft Excel to create Gantt charts. But I like this is just it's free if you have a .edu account. So I'm going to click on try for free by putting in my my email address. I'm going to put in my Temple email address. And then I'm going to click on try free. And if you're using your school email account, it should work fine. So I'm going to fill out this little form. My name is Brian. Oops, my name is Brian Green. All right, now I'm going to get started. Oh, I have to create a password. All right, I'm not going to save that in Firefox. All right, let's see if this pops up. Here we go. Okay. I guess it wants us to do a little tutorial here, which you could do. So I'm just going to step through this. It's going to give me some more information. Blah, blah, blah. I just want to start using this tool. All right, I'm just going to say that I'm a beginner. And for the kind of work I do, we're going to do software development because that's what we're... Actually, it might be best to do student. Although, I could also do university professor looking to teach project management. There we go. I'm going to do that one. You could probably do student. How many people? I'm going to say 1 to 5 because I don't really need to collaborate with anyone here. So I'm going to submit and then build my project. All right, so my project name is going to be sample, since we're doing a little sample project here. This is going to be a blank project. And let's say that our week runs Monday through Friday. It's a pretty typical work week, right? So this is going to set up our calendar in Gantt chart as Monday through Friday. You could do Saturdays and Sundays if you wanted as well. So let me click on that. All right, here we go. So now I can start to put in my all my stuff. Now the thing is here, I can break my tasks into multiple levels. So I'm going to do, for my tasks, we're going to say that I'm going to do research as one. So research and funding. So my first task is going to be research Wi-Fi. And let's see, this task, according to my chart, this task is going to take 1 day. So let me go ahead and make this 1 day. There we go. Now I'm going to add another task, which is, research PCs. That's also going to take a day. The next task is get funding approval. Now, the thing about funding approval, if you recall, is I can't do that until my other 2 tasks are done. So I'm going to move this over here. And we estimated that that's going to take 12.5 days. So let's see, that's going to be, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There we go. There's our 12.5 days, 13 days. I'm rounding up a little bit. All right, now that I have that all done, I'm going to put a new milestone in. So this or I'm sorry, group of tasks. I'm going to do a new group of tasks. Let me take the little thing out of here. All right, here we go. New group of tasks. And that's going to be, let's see. Actually, you know what? I'm going to do a milestone. Let's do this as a milestone. The milestone is going to be, you know what? Instead of doing a milestone, I am going to do a group of tasks, and this is going to be creating our new classroom. So the first task is to place our order. All right, so we placed our order. Now our order placement is going to take, if you recall, that's going to take 12.5 days. I can't do that until after I have funding. So we're going to put this over here, and I'm going to drag that out to 12.5 days. There we go. So you got our 12.5. That might not be exactly 12.5, but I'm just trying to give an example here. I'm going to move this down out of my way a little bit. All right, so I placed my order. What else do I have? So according to my network diagram, after I place the order, I have 3 tasks that can run concurrently, which was task 7, 5, and 9. So that's unpacking and imaging, installing Wi-Fi, and removing old PCs. So let's do this. So we're going to do unpack image. Install Wi-Fi and remove old PCs. All right, so if you recall, all of these cannot start until later. So unpack an image was going to take 4 days. All right, installing the Wi-Fi, I estimated is taking about a day. So let me go ahead and adjust that to about a day. And removing the old PCs. So that's going to also take about a day. All right, now that those are done, let's see our next task according to the network diagram. So again, I'm just using this network diagram to place these tasks on here. So after these 3, next I can plot this task, task number 6, which is going to take 4 days, and that is installing the PCs in the classroom. So that can start right about here. And again, that's going to be 4 days. Going back to my network diagram, the next one is going to be testing, which is going to take 2.5 days. So that's my last task. So we'll do testing. Move that over. So I'm going to put 3 days because we said 2.5. So I'll round it to a full day. All right, so now I've got all my tasks plotted on here. So you can see which tasks are able to run concurrently. right? We have our major milestones here are sort of laid out on here, right? So we have our task groups. So this gives you a pretty good visual representation. So one last step I'm going to do, just for demonstration purposes here, I'm also going to show the dependencies on these tasks, right? So this task here, funding approval, that can't happen until both of these tasks are completed. And I drew these little lines in here to show that. And likewise, once I get funding approval, that's when I can begin placing my orders. And then scrolling over, once I receive those orders, then I can begin my unpacking. I can also begin installing the Wi-Fi because I'll have the equipment at that point, and I can remove the old PCs. Now I can't install the PCs in the classroom until I've unpacked and imaged them. So we're going to draw that. And of course I cannot do this last step here until I've installed the PCs in the classroom. I also have to make sure that I have my, I can't do this, so I have to draw one here. And then I also have to have my Wi-Fi installed before I can complete this task. All right, so now that I've drawn in all of these lines showing the dependencies in the Gantt chart, and this one doesn't really format it very well. You know, like Microsoft Project, it looks a little nicer, but the important thing is let's say unpacking and imaging these systems is taking longer than I expected. You know, let's say they tell me I'm going to have to double the time that it takes to do that. Notice what happened. It pushes my project out, right? So it automatically does that. And likewise, if I shorten the time, let's say I say, you know what, this is going a lot better than we thought. Oh, look at that. I can lower the amount of time. And then maybe this takes a little bit longer. I can move that out. And I can go all the way back to the very beginning of my project. Let's say researching the PCs is taking longer than I thought. You know, maybe I just didn't get to it yet. So that pushes my project out. So you can see over here, it pushes the duration of the project. And it gives me a nice date. I can say, well, if everything goes according to plan, it looks like we're to be done on March 29th, right? So I started all the way back here on, you know, February 2nd, for example. And I can estimate that I'm going to be done on March 29th if I started on February 2nd. When you're done making a chart in Team Gantt, so let's say I've completed this, I'm all set, I'm ready to present this to someone. If I go over here to menu, I can export this, so I can print or export as a PDF. You can also, I think, do an image file as well. Oh look, you can do a CSV, so you can use it in Microsoft Excel. I didn't know that. But let me go ahead and just do print as a PDF. So I've set some options over here: letter size, paper, portrait, orientation. I'm going to do landscape so that it's a wider piece of paper than it is taller. I'm just going to leave the rest of the stuff on here and see what happens. So let's take a look at our PDF. There we go. Got a nice visual representation of our project in Gantt chart using a PDF. And you can see here, this is where I extended out the researching PCs, right? But according to our network diagram and the work breakdown structure, this should be a little shorter. So to review, what we started with is first, I'll drag this over. So first, we started with a nice little list of our tasks, estimated the time using the PERT technique. And once I finished this, so once I got this done, I then took all that and I used draw.io. Draw this over, drag this over. I used draw.io to make myself a network diagram so I could find the critical path and I could brainstorm all of my you know, how these tasks relate to one another and what their dependencies are. And I highlighted in red here to show what that critical path looks like. And then once I finished that, I was able to, let me go back to, I was able to use Team Gantt to create a Gantt chart that shows the overall project plan. And if I were the project manager, I would be able to go in here and adjust this as I'm going through the project. And you'll notice in Team Gantt, if you play around with this, one of the cool things about this is you can go in here and assign people to these tasks, right? So I can assign, you know, if I have multiple people on the project, they would get a notification they've been assigned. they could go into Team Gantt and say when they're done with their portion of the project or what their status is on the project. So it's kind of cool. You can do some neat things in here with Team Gantt. It's not quite Microsoft Project, but it's a great product, I think, for if you want a web-based product to manage, to collaborate managing a project. But again, Microsoft Project can also do something like this as well. And as I said, you would have to pay for this commercially, but to try it as students, you can try it and use it. Maybe if you're doing a group project for a class, you could use this to try your hand at project management. So that's it. So that is Project Management 101, just some of the basic techniques that we use in project management when we're managing projects. And if you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.